I believe that what is the secret message, it's not even so secret, it's right in the title, is if we don't ask for permission, if we behave a bit more like Jeff Bezos, who started Amazon, if we act a bit more like Steve Jobs, who started Apple, if we act a bit more like Pat McGrath, who started Pat McGrath Labs, if we act a bit more like Kathy Hughes, who started Radio One and took it public in the United States, those are examples of people who said, there's a need out there. I'm going to bring some people on to help me to get that need done, but I don't need you to tell me that I can actually go disrupt the marketplace. I can undo the radio broadcasting ecosystem on my own with my idea, because I understand it that well. That's not asking for permission, but saying,
welcome everyone to the latest edition of the You Unleashed podcast with Femi Akinyemi, the podcast focused on helping you unleash your greatest abilities and fulfilling your purpose. This week, I've got an amazing guest. He's been with us before, and it was as much a blessing as I'm sure it's going to be now. And this week's topic is going to be about the need for permission. We don't need permission. And that's what we find with a lot of us. A lot of us, most of the time, want to do great things, but we find ourselves looking around and waiting for someone to tell us, you're good enough, you can do it. But before we go into it, why don't we just reintroduce Eric? He's a friend of the show. So Eric is a co-founder and CEO of Impact X Capital Partners, a venture capital firm investing in the underrepresented entrepreneurs in the UK and in Europe. He is also a serial entrepreneur and a technology exec who has worked with numerous innovative companies and invests in fast growth businesses, helping Black and female entrepreneurs get the jump start they need. In 2011, shortly before making London his home, and we are glad to have him, Eric was appointed by President Obama to the Small Business Administration's Council on Underserved Communities as an evaluator for White House Fellow applicants. Since then, the Financial Times has placed Eric among the UK's top 100 BAME leaders in technology, and he has been included in the Power list as one of the most influential Black people in Britain. Eric has also appeared on Radio 4 and Sky News and in the Financial Times, Fortune, Forbes, Bloomberg, Guardian, Times, Sunday Times, and I can go on. And he's also been a host on the award-winning show, The Money Maker. Eric, super excited to have you again. Welcome.
Femi, thank you for having me. Sometimes when I've been someplace, they don't want me again. So thank you for taking the time to have me.
Oh, it's glad. Yeah. I mean, it's glad because I think whenever you come, you challenge us, and we need to be challenged as a people, right? You always show us what is truly possible, if only we can. And I don't want to tell us off and say get our act together, but if only we channel our minds and we have the belief. Do you find that you constantly need to challenge us as a Black people, really, if we're being frank and honest, Black and women, to stretch?
Oh, Femi, that is a critically important question. Is that my role, and is that what I have to do? Well, quite frankly, I think many people have to do the same for me. I think there are people who have to challenge me all the time to think a bit bigger. There are people who have to challenge me to consider who my allies are. All the sort of themes which are in the book have come from the book, We Don't Need Permission, from hard-won experiences. And those hard-won experiences are often challenges, and they challenge my assumptions, the way that I was raised, what I thought was the way forward, what I thought would win and be correct, what I thought would be good and acceptable to others, all of those types of things. And so, yeah, I challenge others just the same way that others challenge me on a daily basis.
No, that's true. Thanks for that. So happy to have you, and you are always welcome. Don't worry. If they don't want you, we will have you, and we can have you all day. So last time we spoke about the double bottom line, about how one of your big things, which is if you're a Black business, you have the ability to create Black policies. That means that you're able to influence social justice, social change through your own organization. In effect, you were saying a black business, because it's black owned, has the more latitude, power, ability to put in place black policies that are, or policies, let's not say black policies, because what we all want is social justice. It's not about color. So what, but it just so happens to be we're the ones asking for it. What you're saying is if you can create those businesses, you can then create fair policies that are colorblind and treat everyone the same. And that was a challenge. So that was the last time we spoke, and that was in the midst of a pandemic. Fast forward a year and some change, and you're now an author, and you've also been on a reality business show. So you're clearly been a man who's been keeping busy.
Mm. I do, it's because, Femi, we don't know how much time we've got. The question, I don't have an expiration date that I already know when I'm going to expire. So I need to get done some things right now. And it's not that that's the only thing that drives me. The other thing which drives me is there's so much to do, Femi. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that as of 2018, and this is before the pandemic, this is before runaway inflation, this is before the price of energy and heating our homes is going to put many of us into poverty, that in 2018, a statistic was found that 1 in 2 Black children live below the poverty line. 1 in 2. That means if you're sitting with somebody and look to the right or you look to the left, one of you, if you're a child, is in poverty if you're Black here in the UK. That's 1 in 5 if you're a white child. That kind of a situation needs to be rectified quickly. That's an issue for which social justice is absolutely required. And quite frankly, I don't imagine that many of the policy makers who are over there in the Houses of Parliament are thinking on a day-to-day basis about those Black girls and boys who are living in poverty and what are the ways that we get them out of poverty. We are thinking about that as a Black community. But one of the challenges we have is because of money, and we don't control huge, deep, and somewhat seemingly inexhaustible sources of money, we are not in a position to say that we want to keep poverty eradication for Black children at the top of the agenda. It is terrible that things are happening in the Ukraine, and it is terrible that these things are happening. So the Ukraine is never going to exceed the interest that we have in getting rid of poverty among Black children. And so we don't let the news cycle turn. We don't become the flavor of the moment. We put ourselves in primary positions to take care of addressing our primary concerns. And that's why I think business is so important, Femi, because businesses are the things which are producing wealth in the world today. The inheritance and that sort of thing, but generally it's coming from commerce. Yeah. And that commercial activity, Black people have very rarely owned sort of generation-changing businesses. Yeah. And a generation-changing business, I'll give you some names. Think about when you go on vacation now. You don't just think about a hotel or a hostel. You think about Airbnb. It's changed the way that we've done that sort of business. There used to be a time you went straight to the airline to buy an airline ticket because of things like Travelocity, because of things like Kayak. Those are things which have caused us to think very differently. Cheaper tickets, all of that sort of stuff has caused us to change our behaviors. And that doesn't even go to some of the big things that we use on a day-to-day basis. Think about Amazon. Think about Google. Think about Instagram. Think about Twitter. Those are ways of communicating, ways of connecting, creating communities that did not exist a generation ago. And in terms of changing within a generation behaviors and focus, and to also create inordinate amounts of wealth that can then be used, sometimes for good, but often not for good, what we want to see is that there's a Black woman from Birmingham, Bristol, Bath, you name a place, Battersea. And we want that Black woman to be starting a business that has the same sort of impact as an Amazon or a Google, in terms of we think about it everywhere in the world, we use it every day, and we think about the leaders of those organizations as being extraordinary visionaries. We want them in every conversation about public policy. We want them in every conversation that we have about economic policy, and they can be the basis of social justice movement. So that's all we're talking about. We're saying that if we can build, in this book, we don't need permission. We're saying that if you can build businesses. And if we as Black people will build those businesses, we can change the world. We can continue to march. We continue to vote. We can continue to sue. We can continue to collaborate. We can continue to find allies. But once we control enough resource that we're able to actually then participate on an ongoing basis with the priorities that we think are important, then we will get closer to the promised land. And that's what we're trying to do. And that promised land is a promised land of equality and equity. That's what we're looking for.
So ultimately, the cold truth is, in this world, economics gives you the power. Economics gives you influence. And we are not economically liberated. And hence, we are always seen as consumers. We don't create wealth. We don't have business. And it's a vicious cycle. So then we don't have a seat at the table, or we don't have, and since we don't have a seat at the table, we can't drive policy discussions. Since we can't drive policy discussions, we're always the last person on the list when they get thought about. And then it goes on and on and on. So until we push our own people forward to create wealth with business, and then they have a seat at the table and they can champion our cause and then drive policy change, and water, tide rises, right? It lifts everyone up. And then all of a sudden we're making change. So we can do all of these good things like voting, all of that good stuff, but economics is the quickest way to effect this change, isn't it?
And I would say, Femi, you just described a vicious circle that exists. That vicious circle of Black people in the UK and around the world, this is almost 100%, earn less than their white counterparts. Black people in the UK own only 30% of us own homes. 70% of us are paying rent in some form or another. In the UK and in the United States, there are billions and billions and billions of pounds and pence and dollars and cents that are never made and don't get added to the gross domestic product of countries because of underinvestment in Black business. It is estimated in the United States that's $1 trillion per year. It is estimated in the UK at 75 billion pounds a year that never gets to the gross domestic product, which could help in many of the challenges that we're having. What we have instead, we have a lot of small businesses, particularly started by Black women. Black women are the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs, and Black women have been building businesses at a feverish pace, particularly during and after COVID. Some of that's for good reason, because they have great ideas and they really want to do something. Some of it is for poor reasons, because they're being displaced in the market and they have to find a way to survive, which of course, Black people are superheroes in terms of survival and prospering while surviving. In any case, when you look at Black businesses in the UK, 50% of them have turnover of less than 25,000 per year. Put that in context. 50%, that's half of the businesses in the UK that are run by Black people make less than the livable wage of London. That is before you take out all of your carrying costs of that business, your rent, your cost of employees, if you have any employees, but generally you're not going to have any, your cost of supplies, all of that. So you're really making less. Most Black businesses in the UK are making less than the livable wage. They're not going to be able to be part of what we're talking about in this book, because they're in survival mode. They are not hiring 2, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000 people. Instead, they're barely keeping afloat the person who's actually the sole trader in the business. And most likely, that's a hustle as opposed to a business, which is even maintaining their lifestyle. They cannot offset their lifestyle based on that. You can't really buy a house on that. There are all sorts of things that happen. That's vicious circle. There's a virtuous circle that we could have. And that virtuous circle is one where Black people are actually starting businesses, that are hiring Black people who are getting those jobs and getting experiences. They're using those experiences to grow. They're using those experiences to go colonize other organizations. And I use that word colonizing very specifically. They use that money, that experience, to start their own businesses. Some exit, and that releases capital, which can be used for philanthropic reasons, to fight the good fight and to make sure that we're funding the moment and the movement. But in addition, Femi, it can then be used to seed the next generation of entrepreneurs. And that's what's an important. So the vicious circle versus the virtuous circle. That's what I'd like to see. More focus on the virtuous circle.
Which gives us a nice segue into the book in your background. We don't need permission. So when I read that book, I had so many thoughts about what it meant, but we're speaking to you. So when we say we don't need permission to do what?
Permission.
What do you mean by
permission? To do it all, Femi. Permission to do it all. Femi, permission looks very different in various circumstances. You might be working for somebody else and you need permission in order to get a more responsible job or a higher paying job. You need to persuade someone to let you do something. You might be the best at what you're doing. You might be good enough at what you're doing, but you need someone else who's a boss to say, I'm going to let this person do this next thing. Sometimes we are seeking permission by saying, I want to be part of this club, whether it be an exclusive club or a non-exclusive club, but I want to be part of this. And there are rules for admission that you have to get.
Yeah.
We ask for permission when we have to go to the bank to borrow money to start a business. Will you deem me interesting enough because of the assets that I have and the money and the income that I bring in to actually, and the business plan that I put in front of you to give me money in order to make this, to give the lifeblood to this organization. Those are all examples of asking for permission. The other example of asking for permission is to actually even start a business, which I see very frequently. I talk to entrepreneurs all the time who are constantly asked, saying, I just want to pull your ear for a moment. I just want to pick your brain for a little bit. Do you think this is a good idea? And that asking for permission, me to have to tell you that yours is a good idea. You, as an entrepreneur, are asking a third party to give you permission to do what you know needs to be done. Now, don't do it just, sort of wake up one morning and say, I want to start this sort of business, but do some research, put a plan together, see how much it's going to cost you, see how much time it's going to take, compare it with other people who've done things in the past. There's always someone who's done something that it can at least be informing your decision. Do all of that. But that is a very different situation than it is asking for permission. Bank, will you give me money? And so what I think about when I say, do we use, and some of us go through life all the time just asking for permission. I believe that what is the secret message, it's not even so secret, it's right in the title, is if we don't ask for permission, if we behave a bit more like Jeff Bezos, who started Amazon, if we act a bit more like Steve Jobs, who started Apple, if we act a bit more like Pat McGrath, who started Pat McGrath Labs, if we act a bit more like Kathy Hughes, who started Radio One and took it public in the United States, those are examples of people who said, there's a need out there. I'm going to bring some people on to help me to get that need done, but I don't need you to tell me that I can actually go disrupt the marketplace. I can undo the radio broadcasting ecosystem on my own with my idea because I understand it that well. That's not asking for permission, but saying, could you please give me a job so I can go from being a senior manager to director of a company? That's having to ask for permission. And I think too many of us are in there and feel as though that is actually a good outcome, to continue to ask for permission and be told, you're good enough, let me put you in the next role. It's not a bad thing to do. I'm not saying don't do that, but that is a strategy and it's not the only strategy.
So we're constantly looking for validation of some sort. Is it a need for validation?
Well, it's not just a need for validation because some of it's about survival. You are sitting there and you are a bus driver and you want to get a different route. And so you have to then ask, may I have this different route, which is permission. So it's not necessarily just validation. Validation, I think, is an important piece. I'm glad you mentioned that. But this is some people have to ask for permission for survival. That's a hard place to be in. And you want to try and get out of it. Other people get to determine, do you live or die? That asking for permission is terrible. We've lived in this system. It's called slavery, right? Where everything you had to do was all based on someone else giving you permission because they held sway over you. And so I think that we need to think a bit more deeply about, are we always asking for permission? Are we doing what we could do or doing as much as we can hopefully do?
And that's a great point you mentioned about slavery. And one of the things I think about when I think about this is, I think for a lot of us, it's about role models. If you are a white kid or an Asian kid, to a certain extent, you can see Ambani around you. You can see Reliance. You can see all of those emphasis. You can see them around you and go, he did it. I can do it. If you're a white kid in San Francisco, there's legendary tales about all of the guys who've come through to Silicon Valley and achieved it. And you can easily identify. For us, and it doesn't matter, and we've spoken about this, is black, whether you're in Africa, through the effect of colonialism, if you're in America, slavery, or you're in the UK, and it's with the policies that help people down, there are not many role models. So to a certain extent, it's kind of understandable when you're kind of thinking, no one's done it before. I'm a trailblazer. Can I do this? Am I allowed to do this? So how do we break that paradigm, that invisible cage that holds us back, thinking, I can't see anyone that's done it, so how can I do it?
So I think you actually gave the answer there, Femi. You said, can I be a trailblazer? Of course you can be a trailblazer. You don't need permission to be a trailblazer. You really don't. Now there might be some imposter syndrome, there might be some self-doubt and all those types of things, and we'll have to work on those sort of issues. For me, as I believe people need to consider in terms of these alternative strategies, that we live in a world where there is more information and access available to anyone who has a smartphone, anyone who has a public library card, there's information that's an infinite amount. The amount of information we have at our fingertips dwarfs what many of us in terms of our entire country could have imagined a generation ago being available at the touch of a button. So that, to me, is a poor excuse if a person says that they don't have role models. Because, quite frankly, if you were to ask me now, who are role models that young Black women should look at as business people and who have been able to accumulate $1 billion in assets or create companies that are £1 billion in terms of that delivery system, you would say 100% of Black girls know Rihanna. Rihanna, they might know as a singer. Rihanna is a business person who has a business that has made her net worth over £1 billion. That's Rihanna. Rihanna, you might think it's interesting to watch her on stage, but Rihanna is also shaking and singing and dancing and writing lyric in the boardroom. You might think about Serena Williams, who's playing right now in the US Open. We all know Serena. Serena is a person who has her own venture capital firm called Serena Ventures, who is investing in other people's businesses. We all know Oprah Winfrey. I mean, these are all women. Serena's not, but these other two women are both billionaires. Kathy Hughes is a billionaire. Yeah. Sheila Johnson's a billionaire. They've made their money based in a single generation based on businesses that they have worked on. So in my opinion, there are lots of role models that people can see. Instagram allows you to look at them instantly. They have magazines, television shows, radio. They're on every media that there is. The question of, are we looking for the right sorts of stories? Are we looking for what they wear, or are we looking at their bank accounts? I'd be looking at their bank accounts as opposed to sort of what they're wearing this season. So for me, I don't think that there is a lack of role model. And if indeed that were the case, a person like Kamala Harris would not exist, right? A Black woman who is the second most powerful person in the United States, who is an elected official. I mean, it's just, those things exist. They are reality. It's not a figment of our imagination. It's happening today in the world in which we exist. And if for me, I spend so much time on YouTube, maybe I'm missing what's going on around me. But I think that if the same way that I can find that obscure video of Tom Jones singing a song with Stevie Wonder in 1970, I should be able to find some inspiration. Yeah. And so I say we don't need permission to actually go out there and look for it and find it. And if you must have an example, there are hundreds of examples for everything you want to do. 100. I promise you, I kid you not. Yeah. There will be 100 examples outside of, can I be elected? Well, even then, can I be elected president of a country? If you look at Africa with 54 of them, Yes, you can be elected president of the country. If you look at the Caribbean, with all of those sort of nation states, you can be elected president. If you look at the United States, you can be elected head of the government.
Yeah.
Those are things which are all possible. So I cannot accept the idea that that there are not enough examples for people to actually find inspiration.
Okay. So, and I take that because that is a wake-up call. So when you say we don't need permission, it's partly here's how to do it, because we'll come to that, but it's also guys, girls, wake up. It's partly that as well. So the question I do have then is, what do you think is, so for a lot of us now, what do you think your experience of speaking to quite thousands of entrepreneurs, men and women, and everything else is, what do you think is really holding us back? Because there's ideas a dime a dozen. What's holding us back from going forth and achieving that? And that's a kind of nice segue into the steps you can take to start to break free of those.
So thank you for that, Femi. I believe the key thing is our own mental shackles, which is a lack of imagination and confidence, which is all about, needing permission from other people who give us confidence, who help us to see and validate what it is that we're saying and what we believe in. I would say that is the biggest hindrance. I really do not believe the biggest hindrance is access to capital. I don't believe it is that Black people don't work together well. I really don't believe that, because my experience shows that Impact X, for instance, as an example, Impact X, I grew up in North Carolina. When I was 18 years old, I had never met a venture capitalist. The people who were highly respected in my community were doctors, lawyers, and teachers, right? That's who highly respected. Yeah. Like in all Black communities, right? And then engineers came along. It's like, ooh, they're interesting. And other people came along, but it was really those sorts of people, and even small business owners also. I said when I was 18, I talk about this a little bit in the book, that when asked, what do you want to be? I said a venture capitalist. Where would Eric Collins, who grew up in a town with, the whole area, there were 3 towns that were together, cities that were together, that all together had about 1 million people in population. I lived outside the city limits. I lived in the country. We lived next to a farm. And some mornings you wake up and the horses and cows would have broken through the fence that separated us, and they'd be in the front yard. So there are all sorts of things that would say maybe being a venture capitalist is out of reach. And quite frankly, what is a venture capitalist at 18? What do you know about that? But where did I get that information? I was reading magazines like Black Enterprise magazine. There's a UK magazine now that's focused on Black businesses. I just did a podcast with them. I was watching television shows, everything from Soul Train straight through to, the Jeffersons. And so like the Fosters or someone else, I'd be watching these television shows and they would be showing me that there are other sort of existences in the world. I would read Business Week as a magazine. Those sorts of things helped me to see sort of some other possibilities and to help me to expand my mindset that I didn't have to become a doctor or a lawyer. There were other things that I could do. I could be an astronaut. I could be a stuntman. Or a magician. These are all what my brother wanted to do. He eventually, but that's sort of what he wanted to do. But he also, where did he learn that you could be a stuntman? That was actually a career, because we just looked at things and sort of saw a world that was out there, and we had parents who supported, you can infuse yourself into this sort of system. So I believe that it is the mindset, which is our most valuable organ, which is the thing which sometimes keeps us in place. And that if we were to change a little bit of that mindset to say that challenges are opportunities to create disruption. Challenges or opportunities, not having examples is an opportunity to investigate and to do some research. Yeah. Not having capital is an opportunity for us to build models that require not third-party capital, but use revenue instead. Not having a lot of customers is an opportunity for us to investigate, are there things that people are currently spending money on that they'd rather spend money on something else, and how do I do that? So how do I get them to turn that money from this use to that use? I think all of those things are ways to change a mindset. And that is a very, very powerful thing. And the most important piece, in my opinion, is what we talked about before, which you reminded me of, and not thinking small, that solving problems for your community is one thing. Solving problems for the world is generation changing in terms of social justice. So that's the other piece.
And when you think of Elon Musk, you think of all of these guys. They thought of a global problem that they wanted to solve. That's what they all did in this.
You know, the most interesting thing about Elon Musk for me, Femi, and I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, but
no, it's fine. No, you're not. You're not. I was finished.
The most interesting thing is that he's an African, isn't he?
Yeah, South African.
Yeah, he's a South African. And here's a South African, and we know lots of South Africans now, right? And there are more black South Africans than there are white South Africans. So I imagine that if one South African can do what he's done, there are many other South Africans, women and men, who can actually do something extraordinary. The interesting thing for me about him is not just that he's an African, but that also what we have is that he does not seem to seek permission from other people. He does. And do you see,
far from it? Far from it.
And doesn't he dominate every news cycle, every newspaper in every part of the world, whether you are in Johannesburg, whether you're in Freetown, whether you're in Washington, D.C., you are reading about Elon Musk almost every day. And we didn't even know the name Elon Musk, 15 years ago. That's the power of having an organization that is of global scale and global impact that you build and that is identified with you as an individual. And when Elon Musk becomes Alonia Musquet, a black woman from Angola, that's when we know that we have the building block of social justice. And that's what we're looking for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can just imagine a black woman in that position and the wall is broken. Mm-hmm. The wall is broken. So, excellent. So, loving the book, We Don't Need Permission, How Black Business Can Change Our World. And looking at the synopsis, a powerful 10-step guide to transformative entrepreneurship for underrepresented people from Eric Collins yourself. And you give us 10 steps for this entrepreneurial transformation. And I'll run through them. It's embrace the unexpected. Engage in consistent and continuous acts of disruption. Let go of small, think bigger, think global, and prepare for pitfalls. Take risks using data to mitigate the downsides. Put your business where your mouth is and put your money where your mouth is and make your resources matter. Leverage what you know. Become a convener by making your business bigger, your mission bigger than yourself. Invest in women to create alpha. Share your vision and make time appropriate asks. And don't forget to recruit allies and always bet on black. So I'll pick a few and you can pick a few and we can leave the rest. And hopefully when we come to the end, their curiosity can be piqued and we'll also tell them where to get the book. I actually like step 6, leverage what you know. Because, and I'll use myself as a personal example, a lot of times I've always tried to go to business with what I know. But there's sometimes I feel, and I'm educated, and sometimes being educated is one of the worst problems you can have because it locks you in, and you've got to break that paradigm. And sometimes I find myself trying to find ways to build a business out of my education, which can be incredibly hard. And then I see people who are not educated and they just go for it and they build a big business. So I'm quite intrigued by leverage what you know, because sometimes that can be quite hard. So when you say leverage what you know, what do you mean, really?
It's a good question, Femi. In the book, I try and outline, always using some examples from my experience. I've spent life, so I went to university, and after university in the United States, you can go into graduate school. I went to graduate school to become a lawyer. And in law school, I learned a number of things. And then from there, I became a strategy consultant. So I spent a lot of time in various industries helping people to make better decisions and come up with good solutions. A professor of mine started this consulting firm, and so I joined it. After that, I went into the technology field. I joined Time Warner and spent some time with one of their subsidiaries, a wholly owned subsidiary. And then from there, I kept on moving to smaller and smaller companies that hopefully eventually got big, and then we sold to somebody else. What I've learned along the way is that educational experience is one thing. on the ground, very consequential experience and deep experience that is built over business cycles, ups and downs, etc., and from understanding various roles and ways of getting things done, is an invaluable tool to try and come up with a disruptive solutions to the problem. So if you are, for instance, a person who's a lawyer, you have a very different set of experiences than a person who went to law school. As a lawyer, you've tried to bring in clients. As a lawyer, you tried to deliver your work product in a timely basis. As a lawyer, you might have gone to court and done something. All of those things are very useful bits of information, which can then be used to say, I understand exactly how it's done today. These are the inefficiencies. These are the ways that it's done poorly. And if we were to do this thing, we can actually make things better. And in fact, if we did this thing and we bolted on some technology, we would actually be able to have something extraordinary. That is leveraging what you know. There are so many people who are native in their knowledge. And in fact, Black people across Europe and the UK have long experience and deep wells of knowledge in terms of digital and technology, participation both on the consumer level and as employees, founders, etc. We have the same experience in health, education, and lifestyle, and we have the same experience in media and entertainment. And that's in many different places in Europe as well as the UK. That is, in fact, a true statement about we over-index in those sort of arenas, in those sectors. So that's where I believe talent is going to come from. The next disruptive solution is going to come from people who are very deeply immersed in those sort of places as both business as well as users and lovers, and not people who hate it, but people who love it. That for me is or people who would love to leverage the experience to have another experience that they love. So people who are trying to disrupt travel, I'm sure they don't enjoy the airline industry, but they find ways to try and help the airline industry to be more efficient for them and effective for them. That, in my opinion, is being a person who is not a visitor, but a native, and therefore leveraging what you know can get better results so that when I invest in you, the likelihood that you'll be successful as opposed to someone who's thought about it but never lived it.
I get it. So what you're saying is, so there's a difference between being a lawyer and then deciding to go open a law firm and being a lawyer and seeing inefficiencies in maybe the way the court process works and investing in tech that accelerates the way court cases flow through the system, that sort of thing. So there's a difference between copy and pasting what everyone else has done and literally trying to solve a pain point, trying to alleviate a pain point and solve a problem. Two different things. Because the other one, you're competing, it's red waters, it's red ocean. There's everyone there. But there's something else with taking your knowledge and the blue ocean effect. You find a problem that needs to be solved and bringing your deep knowledge, your deep love, and trying to solve that problem and building a business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think deep knowledge and deep love, I like the way you put those two things together. I think that is just like, that's the X factor right there. When you have deep love and deep knowledge and you put those two things together, so you can create some fantastic organizations.
Okay. So that's the first lesson for the listeners is you want to build a business and you don't need permission and you're asking, what do I do next? One of the things, and you've got to get this book because I'm looking at it and I need it, is leverage what you know. And this isn't about if you're an accountant creating an accounting firm, that's good because we need more Black owned accounting firms. But if we're thinking next level, leveraging technology, it's understanding where the pain points are and bringing technology, using it. For example, it doesn't have to be technology, it can be process, and unleashing a new business model, a new business that then means you are serving a global audience. That is a good example. Brilliant. The next one I love is the let go of small. And this is one that as a people applies to us, is let go of small. I remember when I first had my podcast with you and I was listening to the podcast before we had this one, and check out our first podcast Eric and I did. And you can see it's a small plug. You can see it in the podcast directory in the usual place, Apple Podcasts, etc. And one of the things he said to me is, Femi, think of this podcast. How big can it be? If you came to me and said, my podcast has 100,000 listeners within a year, I'd be asking you, how did you do that? And there is something there. And that challenged me. And I think that's what you're saying here is we need to start to think above the mom and pop, which is good, or a small sole trader, which is good. We have to think bigger, think global, and prepare for the challenges of thinking that way.
So you and I are going to let's go through an exercise. Let's name some rivers that exist in the world. So the Danube, the Nile, the Mississippi, the Thames,
the Amazon.
And then there's a river called the Amazon that dwarfs all of those in terms of size. What did Jeff Bezos decide to call his company? He did not decide to call it Danube. He decided to call it Amazon because his aspirations were to be the biggest, to be the most far-reaching, to be a place where books and records could come from every little tributary and get to this source. And that
so where all small rivers flow into it, everything else flows into the mothership.
So that, in my opinion, is, all the answer we need. That sometimes in a name is an aspiration, and that aspiration will help to determine. It gives us a signal as someone who's viewing the founder what their aspiration is. His was to be a huge, imposing, and important thing. When you choose something very close to home, it's like, well, I chose the brook in my backyard because that's what I know very well and something I feel comfortable with. I get that, and how it can be very, very comfortable and it can be very, very successful. However, the likelihood that that is then going to have that same sort of resonance around the world and have the opportunity to be the tool for social change is a little bit different. It may be even a lot different. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. And this is important because at the crux of this is bringing about social change. Mm-hmm. We are not dismissing building a business to feed your family or building a small business. That is because in the larger picture, the more of those that exist, that in itself brings about a change because wealth is in our hands. But when we're talking about changes that move the needle big time, we need more of us. We don't need everyone, but we need, if we had 3 or 4 Amazons in our community, we're talking a different game.
Employing 1 million people a year, and Black people tend to hire Black people. Women tend to over-index in terms of hiring women and give them a chance. We wouldn't have so many DEI retrofitting activities going on. We would have companies that were started with a very different DNA, and that would mean that they would get different results.
I love that. So different DNI companies trying to get a DNI when really we need companies with the right DNA. I love that. And that brings me to invest in women to create alpha. And I want to talk about this again because I didn't talk to you about it enough, but the first time we spoke, I could sense a passion for women and business, but I didn't tap into it. And I'm going to give you the opportunity to talk about why you are so passionate about women in business and what you see, just to partly encourage them, but also to make it clear that there is an opportunity. Speak a bit about women in business and creating alpha.
So my experience has been that it is the women with whom I have worked who have been the individuals down to a one who have generously given of their time, and have expansively thought differently about what the world could be, what are solutions to problems, etc. There is a disruptive opportunity in being an other. And if you are a Black woman, there's not too much other. You can't go much further than that in terms of being other than the current power structure. And that sort of space that those individuals exist in can be so disruptive. There's such inefficiency in terms of investing in them and viewing their ideas, the ideas coming from this group, as being sort of interesting and worthy of expanding. I believe, and our investing thesis shows, and our investing track record shows at Impact X, that when we invest in those women-led businesses, particularly women-led businesses that are run by Black women, the opportunity to exceed expectation and thus return capital and create jobs It's just very, very different. When we think about what are the organizations that are for the future going to be sort of future resistant and the organizations that are going to produce them, women who think differently about organizational structure, management techniques, the opportunity to use other models other than the army and competitive sports teams as ways that we put organizations together, in my opinion, creates a competitive advantage that works across culture, that works across geography, that works across industry. And I believe that that is the trick. People who don't believe that, I imagine, are looking a little bit at how the world currently exists as opposed to predicting themselves forward into how the world will exist. So for me, there have been, and if I want to also then think about something a bit more sort of community oriented, it is women, when money is invested in them, who build the other byproducts in terms of they emphasize more education, health, they emphasize savings, wealth creation. So all of those things are good reasons why investing in women makes sense. And I would say in the book, there's also at the beginning of that chapter, which is chapter number 8, invest in Black women to get alpha. There's a quote in there by Shirley Chisholm. Shirley Chisholm was in the 1970s the first Black woman to represent a geographic area in the United States in the federal government. So like the House of Commons, she got elected to be in the House of Representatives. And she understood the dynamic that if they don't invite you to the table, bring your own folding chair. Don't ask for permission to, may I come and sit with you? May my ideas be considered good enough? Bring your folding chair and sit down and get started. That to me is such a powerful image and a very powerful quote. I hope people have that same infusion when they read that chapter about Black.
Yeah, that desire to kick in the door, really, isn't it?
Well, it doesn't even feel like you're being kicked. She just said, "Bring your folding chair." It's like, she didn't say use it like you're in a wrestling match and hit someone over the back of the head with it. She said instead, bring it in and sit down and get started. And that's what you need to do.
And that's first. And I love that because I think, and for you as an investor, Black women, especially, are the ones invested them, and people won't see them coming. They won't see them coming.
You want to do something different. As an investor, you're trying to do something different. You're not trying to follow the herd. Following the herd gets you overly excited about things that might be transient. Studying deeply, and that's what we do at ImpactX. We study deeply. And looking at my career, having spent time in my lived experience, that is where I found great value. That is where I found great return. That is where I found the statement which is made in investing. When you are able to deliver above the market rate, you're delivering alpha. So Black women deliver alpha.
Great. So 2 more, and then we'll sort of come into the home straight. One is, and I want to touch on this quickly, is take risks using data, which sounds a bit contradictory, which is, if you look at the data will tell you no. So what are you trying to get at when you say take risks using data?
Well, I think every organization, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, if you're going to start a business, you've got to take a risk. Being an entrepreneur is not for the timid. It is only for the tenacious, people who have the staying power. And each time that you're making a decision about how I should spend money or how I should spend my time is a risk-reward analysis. When you're making a risk determination, use your data around you, whether it come from consumer information, your customers, what they're telling you, whether it comes from your competitors, what they are actually doing. Use that in order to inform your decision-making. It helps to mitigate the risk, i.e. lessen the risk that you are going to make a wrong decision. You will make plenty of wrong decisions, but this will at least reduce that somewhat. So I always say, find the data, no matter what it takes. Get there and find some data and use that to inform your choice.
Got you. And it's being smart, right? It's the data's there to point.
Yeah, and then follow the data. Yes, and follow it.
Yeah,
don't just look at it. Follow it.
Follow it. And the last one is always bet. We had to end with always bet on Black. So put your chips in and put them on Black, right?
In my work, in terms of how ImpactX was originated, 100% of our investors are Black people from the West Coast and the East Coast of the United States, from the UK, and from France. 100%. So I have found that it is Black people who get it and want to put money to make it happen, put their shoulder to the wheel, because they don't just give you the money and say, bye, go away. They also say, I want to help. Black people are the people who drive that sort of activity. When I look then at who is going to be, we've already proven in the world of arts and entertainment that Black people are leads in those sort of spaces. There's no sort of reason why there is this bright line between. So we know how to create musical formats and genres. So we know about Motown, we know about grime, we know about drill, we know about Afro punk, or we know about Afro beats. But what we don't know is business. When did that happen? That we don't know how to build big businesses. So in my opinion, betting on Black is to bet on the underestimation that exists in other people's minds that we can then fully leverage to get results that are extraordinary. And ultimately, betting on Black is not only betting on financial returns, not only betting on job creation, but it is also betting on social justice, because the other byproduct of this will be that we will help to solve that problem of 1 and 2 Black children, that home ownership problem, that lending disparity problem, that educational attainment problem, that living less long because we have frontline jobs, etc. All of those things can be partially addressed, if not wholly eradicated, by the opportunity to create businesses that actually generate the kinds of capital that can keep our people focused and financed to focus on their proper things.
Yeah. And when you bet on Black, you're betting on yourself, right? So bet on yourself ultimately. Excellent. So last time we spoke, it was at a great event in Reading. And I understand you'll be coming to Reading on September 11 again soon.
I will. The ACF
is
the organization that has invited me, as well as the school governors, to come and speak with a group of panelists from the area. This is a group in South, out here in the south of the UK, who are business people who are working in the space and have true belief that there is a way in which social justice can be promoted. And the ACF, a religious organization, feels as though its membership could benefit from hearing these sorts of things. I am just so impressed that they are saying, come on in, Eric, let's assemble some people and let's talk to the community about what needs to be done in a workshop format. Let's make this actionable. Let's get people excited about leaving and going forward to do the good, hard work.
Well, that's good. And I was, because you've asked I was going to ask, you seem to have an attraction to Reading and we seem to like you. So I was going to ask why Reading. But the second thing is actually quite important. Is the last time you came, we had almost 100 people on a Zoom call and there was so much energy. And after you left, there was energy and then it sort of dwindled away. And this happens. And one of the things I'd like to always think about is, as you come this time, what kind of message do you have to people, especially in Reading, that when you leave, is that you can almost encourage them to get them to hold on to the rope and not let go? Is what causes us to sort of have that adrenaline and I think it's tied to the need for permission. Because if you hung around enough, all of them will ask you, what do I need to do, Eric? But it's how, in your experience, do you find for budding entrepreneurs, especially and speaking to those in Reading, that you think, what can they do to make sure they hold on to that vision and they don't let go? Any
they
tips?
Can remember one phrase: you don't need permission. We're going to lead them with this time. So they have a phrase that they can actually go forward with. You don't need permission.
Yeah. Excellent. So the book is coming out on the 1st of September. Congratulations again.
Thank you very
much. You look good on paperback. So I had that. Congratulations. What is your one thing? So for you, when you started this book, I'm pretty sure there was a burning desire. What is the one thing that you think at the end of this book that will make you go, it's been successful? What do you want us to do that will make you feel at the end, if you look back?
If I see a hashtag that says we don't need permission, and people are telling me where they don't need permission in their lives, I see that on social media, that will help me to understand that we have made an impact, that we have gone beyond just the speaking about it, and we have brought into fruition, we have manifested what it is that we need to have happen. And the mindset is starting to shift. That's it.
Excellent. So you've heard it from Eric himself. Hashtag we don't need permission. And that's it. So thank you, Eric. So when the book's coming out, where can it be? Where can we get this book, actually?
Go to Amazon. You can go online, all the usual places. You can go to Amazon, you can go to Waterstone, you can go to Foyles, all those places. But please do order that book. And it would be great if I can see you at one of these events talking about how you have not required permission and what that has meant for you. I want to hear about it.
Excellent. And by the time this podcast is available, there should be a link in the description to where you can get it on Amazon, and to Impact X if you want to know more about the great work Eric does. Impact X.
We have all the socials. So we have LinkedIn, we have Instagram, we have Twitter. We are all over the place. So look us up, www.impactxcapital.com.
Thanks. Excellent. So you've heard it. So thank you, Eric. And the message is clear. For a lot of us as a people, we always want to bring about change in the society, in our community, and in our own lives. But for a lot of time, we forget that even though we have this great talent and ability within us, we often look around waiting for someone to tell us, you can do it. I myself find myself being needed and reminded sometimes that, Femi, you can do this. But the reality is you don't need permission. The greatest things that were achieved in this world were achieved without waiting for permission. And for you to build that big business that can bring about change, or to achieve anything of note, you really don't need permission. The only person you need permission from is yourself to go ahead, take the risk and achieve. And just embrace the unexpected, leverage what you know, always bet on black, and invest in women, and so much more. And you can get all of this from the new book called We Don't Need Permission by Eric Collins, available on all the major platforms. And remember, we don't need permission. I don't need permission. Eric doesn't need permission. And you don't need permission. Get unleashed. Stay unleashed.